Mold. Moldy house, moldy socks, moldy sink, moldy teeth, moldy brain. Let's talk about mold with co-founder of We Inspect and the host of the Mold Fighters radio podcast, Ryan Karr.
What is mold? Where does it grow? How do you find it and destroy it before it destroys you? Save your home, save your brain. This is my conversation with Brian Karr.
We're going to talk about mold, specifically in the home, how to find it, how to prevent it, how to hopefully get rid of it. And of course, since the home really is an extension of our body and brain, how to do the same within ourselves. But homes and humans are kind of newer parts of history. Mold has been around for, over a billion years, long before even plants and dinosaurs and us and homes especially. So I first want to kind of get a grip on what mold is. What was mold even like? What would it be like outside of the home, beyond humans and homes?
Yeah, it's interesting. This is something that comes up a lot for people who are just sort of discovering that mold can impact health a little bit. The first common question is like, oh, well, mold is everywhere. It's been here for a billion years. Why is it a problem now? It wasn't a problem for my mom. It wasn't a problem for her mom. Like, why should I be concerned about it, right? And, it's a fair question. I think a lot of times, like we as people, in order for our brains to kind of like process things, we have to create little frameworks for ourselves so we can like kind of run things by it and for it to make sense in a way. And so when you have like a line of comparison, like my mom, my grandma, these people, this has been around. Okay, so that's there. So if that's true, then this cannot be true in the end, right? And then our minds are kind of black and white when it comes to things like that sometimes. And then it takes education, diving into things, whatever it is, to start being like, oh, well, maybe it's not, right? And so that takes a little extra. You got to try a little bit at that point, right? So the normal response I think a lot of people have is exactly what you asked, right? And there's like a couple things to sort of keep in mind as you talk about like how the cavemen were versus how we are, right? The homes we live in are 100 million% different than the caves that the cavemen were in, right? And also the lives that they lived are 100 million% different than the lives we live now, right? So like go down those two paths. Let's just talk about the home and the environment itself, right? Our home right now, the entire thing is built of materials that mold wants to grow on and will grow on very easily. That's the first piece. The second piece is we're lining water throughout the entire home, right? So not only are we giving the food source that mold wants to grow on, but we're also have water, which is the life force of mold, right? If water gets there, mold will grow, right? Kind of like a plant. And so now we have that moving through our entire house all the time. The probability of mold growing in our house compared to a massive mold issue in a cave is very, very different for us than it was for cavemen, right? That's the first piece. We have showers and toilets and this and that and the other. And all of those things have moisture issues that are very common and happen in most homes, and those can create problems. The other thing is that the cave that the cavemen lived in was open air. It was an open air cave. There wasn't like a door that sealed it shut. There wasn't energy efficiency. There's none of that stuff that was happening. So now on top of this, we live in a box that is key mold food that we have basically its life force just swimming through the pipes, just waiting for something to happen. And then we seal the box so tight because we don't want our power bill to be high. And now if there's a mold issue that grows, and it's not if, there is mold in every house. And it's also another one of the things that come up a lot. Like every house has mold. Why should I be concerned about it? Which we could get into. So when that happens, now your house is sealed up in a box, and now your exposure is much more significant than it would be if you're living like in an open air cave. So when we look at like how we lived then, the other thing is we spend 90% of our time indoors now. It's an EPA study that was out that talked about this. The cavemen spend 90% of their time outdoors. When you are outdoors, the air is diluted, right? I walk outside, I'm not in a tight box. I'm literally, the entire world is diluting the air that's coming to my face right now. I walk into my tight box, I'm in my, 12 by 12 little studio, office studio thing here. I'm in a 12 by 12 box. My air is not diluted. It is much more concentrated. which means if there is a mold issue that's in here, it's going to persist and my exposure level is going to be higher and higher and higher as that builds up. So yes, mold is a thing that's exists forever. No, it was different in caveman time than it was for us, right? As we have evolved as people, a lot of things have changed. And it's not just in this. I mean, if you start looking at chronic inflammatory diseases, you start looking at cancer rates, you start looking at all these things across the board, the way we live impacts how things affect us, right? We eat a lot of food that triggers inflammation, cancer rates go up, right? We're in a house that has mold issue, and all of a sudden we're getting brain fog and type 3 Alzheimer's disease and all the, cognitive decline, all these other things because of how we live. And so we have the ability to change those things. We have the ability to make changes and do stuff like that. We just have to be aware of it. And then you become intentional about what you do to address those things. And some things are just the way the world is now. And so with that, we then have to figure out, okay, well, what can we do to help counteract that a little bit? And some things you can just completely change in the way that you live your life.
And mold itself doesn't have intentions and desires and dreams and things like that. But like if you could imagine it did, what would a kind of perfect world, heaven be for mold, and what would sort of be the sort of nightmare kind of world? I mean, I guess I'm thinking of things like light and water and air, temperature, etc. I know you also like metaphors, so maybe you can paint a little kind of a dream or a nightmare world for us. Kind of putting you on the spot here, but that would be kind of another fun way to frame this.
No, I could totally. I do love metaphors. They just happen sometimes. Mold is not really different than us. We have things that we need to survive, right? We got to eat. We got to be in a place that's comfortable for us, that we temperature wise is fine, right? And there are certain things that we need to do. Mold needs the same thing, right? So you put a human in a situation where they have no more food, they feel threatened, they're all of a sudden they can't live in their house. What happens when those things happen to humans? They start acting out. They start getting into crime, right? Now I got to go rob this liquor store because I got to pay for the food for my kids' table. Like these that triggers very extreme responses from humans because these are basic things that we need to survive. And when you trigger your survival mechanism, all bets are off and I will do whatever I have to do. And a lot of people will go farther than they ever thought they needed to go if that really, really happened, right? Mold is no different. Mold needs food. Mold needs water, right? They need all these things, right? And so, for example, if mold has created a nice little home for itself, right? Imagine you got your house, right? Got my nice little home. Here I am. And somebody breaks into your house, you're going to react, right? Now, if you're somebody who happens to maybe have a gun in their bed, you live in Texas, right? You have guns everywhere, right? And you live here, you're going to maybe take that gun out and you might shoot the person when they walk in the house, right? If you're someone else who maybe doesn't have a gun or maybe isn't as trigger happy, I didn't mean to call out Texas. I was just watching a show about Texas people, like a ranch show, and they all had guns walking around. You might even have the gun. You might have the ability to do it, but maybe you just don't want to shoot the gun because it's not enough for you to pull the trigger, right? The mold equivalent to that is creating what's called a mycotoxin, which is a toxic chemical that's meant to kill living things. The chemical is created as a defense mechanism. It doesn't just run around shooting it off all over the place, right? Not like Yosemite Sam with his guns in the cartoons. It's not doing that, right? What it's doing is it's sitting on its couch in its room, and then an invader busts in, and in an effort to protect its daughter, it shoots at the guy. That's what mold is doing. So if mold is growing in an area and other mold or other bacteria start kind of coming into its territory, it's going to create that chemical toxin. And it's going to kind of think of mold think of it like a volcano. So it'll create like lava over a volcano, how it comes out. And it creates like a toxic moat around itself, like a protective toxic moat. And now as other molds or bacteria come, it kills it. It's literally a toxin meant to kill living things. That's what mycotoxins are. So they react the same way that we do, right? And now if we know that mold is not maybe I have a mold problem in the house, but you do have a mold problem in your house, and it's just how many are there and where are they located and how health sensitive are you to even realize that it's a problem, right? Because not everybody reacts the same. But if you do have that problem going on in the house and mycotoxins are created, those toxins are meant to kill living things. We are living things. Now, we are much bigger than microscopic bacterial mold, right? So it doesn't kill us like that, right? but it starts creating really big issues in our core operating systems in our body. So you get mitochondrial dysfunction, you get blood-brain barrier breaking, you get, gut barrier breaking, you get all these things that start happening, and it really starts causing cellular dysregulation and a whole batch of health symptoms that get connected to it. So it's something that a lot of times that we don't really think of because you're not going to see, you don't have to have a big flood, you don't have to have big water damage and things for mold to be there, right? Because it's microscopic, it doesn't need a lot, right? But if you happen to be somebody who's more sensitive to that exposure, you're going to start seeing symptoms across multiple areas of your body. And that is a really big key contributor for a lot of people. Like if you have some sort of health issue that's been persistent and it's been labeled as like chronic fill in the blank, right? Like chronic fatigue, chronic whatever, that is a fancy way of saying, I don't know what's causing this problem. So you just have this problem all the time. And, and I'm going to give you a pill to try to solve the symptom, right? But if a doctor says you have chronic fatigue, what they're telling you is that they don't know why you're fatigued all the time. That's what they're telling you. So they just labeled the symptom, chronic fatigue. Here you go. This is who you are now. That is happening for a reason. So a lot of times when people have chronic issues that your traditional medical doctors can't figure out or understand how to address, and then it just becomes take this pill, take this pill, take this pill, there's usually another trigger that's creating the inflammation or creating the root trigger that's causing the symptom. And a lot of times the environment becomes that piece that your traditional doctors don't really look at, but your functional medicine doctors or your integrative medicine doctors would look at something like that. And that's where how the environment plays just such a huge role in people's lives. A lot of times we just don't know about it.
Okay, so maybe if we have these problems brought on by the mold exposure, brain fog, anxiety, mood swings, or neuroinflammation, sleep disturbances, there's all kinds. It's a huge list. Then maybe we might think, okay, well, we got to detox our body, or we got to, take some supplement, or we got to fix ourselves. But I'm guessing your answer, maybe I'm wrong, would be, okay, well, maybe we should fix our environment first, and let's look at the home. Yeah. If someone has these problems that might be mold related, what do we do first? What would you do first?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So to talk to the first piece of it real quick, I think it's both. You have to address the body, right? I hate when doctors are like, I'm not going to even start working with you until you handle your mold problem at home. I hate that. Like, help me in the interim. Let's make a transition plan. Let's have me not feel like crap for the next however many months because you're concerned that your treatments aren't going to work as well. And you think I'm going to get mad at you because my treatments aren't working. Let's just get on the same page and say, hey, listen, this isn't going to be as effective as it can be. But the goal here in this first phase of this process is to just get you feeling maybe a little better, a little more functional while we're figuring out the house and the environment. And then we can work from there, right? Like that's really what the approach should be. I think a lot of doctors now do that, but there was a period of time where there's a lot of the doctors in the mold world that were like, well, until you're out of there, I can't even do anything. So don't come over here, right? So I think it's both. I think it's just understanding that one impacts the other one, right? It's like Corey, my partner at We Inspect, and it's my cousin also, we're a family business. Anyway, he said to me today, I was on a call, we were on a call with somebody and he explained it this way. He's like, I mean, it's like if you were trying to dry off, but you're in a swimming pool, like you will never be dry. Like if your goal is to be dry, yet you're literally just in a pool of water, like good luck, you're never going to dry off, right? Doesn't matter how many towels you throw in the pool, you're still going to be wet. And that's kind of the idea, right? So it's like you do have to fix one for the other one to kind of really make progress. But there's a lot of people that can make incremental or initial progress by starting to work on the body while they're figuring out what to do with the home or even understanding if the home is an issue. And then the question then comes, okay, so like, what do you do, right? If you think the home is an issue. And there's really two paths that one I think can take as they're starting to like go down this road. The first path is the one where you just first need validation and testing data to even prove that there is a problem in the house, right? So someone could be listening to me right now and be like, oh, this guy's really good with metaphors. He's really whatever. That's cool. But like, my house doesn't have anything, right? There's nothing in my house. And so what will happen a lot of times is, and we do this at doctors too, you go to the doctor for your checkup or whatever. You're like, hey, I've been feeling a certain way. I'm like, okay, well, let's run just a couple tests. Let's just get a basic screening of what's going on with you, right? Let's see what's going on. And then you get the screening test back, and let's go down a dark path here for a minute. And it says, oh, your white blood cell counts are weird. We're going to want to run some more tests and like figure out, like, could this be a cancer thing? Is it something else? Is it just like a weirdness in the lab result? Like, I want to get like a special battery of tests now that are really focused on this thing that we found in our screening test and dig into it a little more, so we truly understand if there's a problem, and if so, how do we handle it, right? And so it's not any different for the home, right? So the screening test that you can do is called the dust test. Full disclosure, it's a test that I created with Corey and Michael Rubino of Home Cleanse, and it is literally a dust collection test in a house that will tell you, off of an EPA panel of molds that were created in a study in the late 2000s, how much mold is here, mold species types, and sort of how does it rank, and how significant is it, right? Like, how big of a problem do I have in my house? The dust is the best way to understand this, because the dust collects things over time and it gives you a real historical perspective of what's going on in your home. So it's a really great place to take that sample from. And dirt and dust pops up in our breathing zone constantly just as we move around the house and all these different things. So that becomes what we're breathing. So whatever's in the dust is ultimately what you're breathing on a consistent basis. There's a study that talks about something called the human cloud effect that basically says that. So as you walk around, you constantly pop up settled particle into your breathing zone, and that becomes the human cloud. So as you move around a house, you literally have a cloud of invisible particle that you are disturbing up into your own face. And that's how you breathe what's going on in your house all the time. So by testing the settled dust, we understand what's in your cloud, and then you understand what you're exposed to. And so from that perspective, you say, oh, here's my screening test. Whoa, there's a lot of mold here. Okay, I need to now dig into this, the equivalent of your white blood cell count's weird. We need to dig into this, right? Oh, you have a really high mold load here. This is interesting. We need to dig into this. So what does that mean on our end? It means now you need to look through the house, right? Now you got to go a little deeper in how you test and what you're looking for, right? And you have to understand, like, are there sources of mold in the house? Where are they located? And then based on that, how do we reduce the exposure in the house now, right? Like, how do we make a plan of attack that's going to reduce the amount of load that's popping up in our cloud? So if you think on like the medical kind of comparison that we're making here, low white blood cell, go in, bam, doing a battery of tests, all focused on trying to figure out if I have cancer, if I do, what kind is it, where is it, all those things. And then on the back end, it's like, okay, you do. But good news is we caught it early and we don't need surgery. And we even think that maybe just by changing you to a super low inflammatory diet and doing a couple things, that there's a path for you. On the flip side, hey, it's not good. We need surgery. We need to try to get these things out of here, right? Now, surgery versus a diet change are very, very significant differences in the intervention that's being recommended. But the only way that someone can tell you that is by getting the really specific data from specialized testing to then show the picture and the landscape of what you're working with, and then make really specific recommendations on how to proceed. It's exactly what we do in the house, right? So is it this wall? Is it behind here? Is it in your HVAC system? Is it in over here behind your shower? Like, where is it? And then once we see that, we prioritize it by which areas are the most significant amount of mold that's there. And then what we do is we guide our clients to say, hey, listen, if the goal here is to reduce exposure, because we know it will never be to zero, because like I said at the beginning, there's always mold in a house, right? But the goal is to just reduce the loads down so you can breathe without your body being on constant fight or flight all the time. And if you can do that, that then allows the doctor, who we backtrack and we say, hey, phase one, just help me navigate this as I figure out my house. Now I figured out my house. I know where the problems are. I've done a few key things that are going to have a pretty significant reduction in my ongoing everyday exposure. Now your supplementing and your medical protocols are going to actually show improvement in my body instead of just stabilizing me while I figure it out. So you then are balancing out lower exposure means better health outcome, right? And being supported by your doctor. This is the game that we kind of play in trying to get somebody from having, health symptoms and health reactions to being able to come out on the other side and thrive. And it's not about every single thing has to be gone. It's how do we balance out your exposure versus what you can handle? And how does your doctor help support your resilience and increase your resilience throughout the process? And that becomes the magic formula that allows our clients to not necessarily all have to tear their entire house apart, right? It's just, hey, it's here, here, and here. Work on these first. Let's see how that goes, right? And so that's the idea.
So there's this visible world in ourselves, right? Our physical appearance, our symptoms, our behavior, and underneath that, there's this whole invisible world of things that only maybe doctors and tests can show us. And then the same thing's kind of going on in the home. We might see something. We see our walls, we see our floors, we see the bathroom, the kitchen, and there's a certain physical appearance of that world, and there might be some mold or something. But just like with our bodies, there's this whole invisible world behind all that we maybe cannot find on our own, but people like you can help with. But still, I imagine most people are not calling in mold experts, just for various reasons that you know all about. But how can we find the mold ourselves? How can we kind of make some of that invisible world more visible or know where it might be?
Yeah. So this is actually like the core of how we go through a house, right? So when we go through a house, we're really looking for three things. Do we see visible, suspicious looking mold, right? Now, I would tell you that most houses don't have mold growing all over the walls. It's not like what you search on the internet when you search mold, right? Like the internet doesn't know how to show you mold without visibly making it look terrible. Like you need a visual. Your eye needs to see something. So it's the only thing you ever see when you look it up, right? But the majority of homes don't have that going on. But there are places. So that's one thing we definitely look for. Then we're looking to see if there's active moisture issues, right? Mold does need water to grow. So if there is an active moisture issue, that's important. So moisture meters, infrared cameras that are helpful throughout that process. The third thing that we look for, and the thing where we find the most problems, 80 to 90% of the hidden mold problems we find fall into this third category, not the first two, are areas that have little small visible signs that moisture impacted it at some point in time in the history of time. It's not wet right now. And so what happens is while mold does need water to grow, it does not need water to stay. And this is probably the biggest misconception in our industry, where people will go in and be like, oh, it's not wet. Can't be mold here. Mold needs water. That's like saying that you can't have a plant outside if you stopped watering it 2 weeks ago. It's still outside. It's still there. You just stopped watering it. So now what started happening to it? Well, it started to dry out. Maybe the leaves and stuff started bending over, like wilting over, because it started losing its nutrient source of water. Maybe the petals and the flowers start falling off of the flower, like it's starting to deteriorate, right? That plant out there that you stopped watering. But the plant is still there. And those things falling off of the plant, that's because it's become dry. It's more brittle. It's not healthy. So I actually do believe this. I feel that areas where there was a moisture issue, that is no longer there anymore. So it got fixed, right? Or it stopped or something like that. And mold grew though as a result of it. Mold dries out. The whole colony, all the particles now, part of that colony can break apart and move into the indoor environment and get into our human cloud that we talked about at a much higher level than if it was a healthy colony that wasn't getting broken apart by air currents that move by. So these hidden areas that are all in the house of like, there was my toilet had an overflow once, and yeah, it got to the wall back over here, but we dried it up with towels and stuff, and it was fine, and it only happened one time, right? Well, if the wall got wet and behind the wall stayed damp for just 24 hours, you could have mold behind that whole wall. And so when we're talking about like how do you find these things, it's really about what we look for. So to your point, like you can't see mold. Mold, I mean, sometimes you can. I can't say you don't always, right? Sometimes you see visible mold, but the majority of mold is microscopic. And if it's not a significant problem, you're not seeing it. And so a lot of times you're going to look at something, it's going to look fine, but it's what's behind the scenes, right? When we think about hidden areas, and I keep saying hidden because it's really important. The reason that mold grows in hidden areas a lot, less light, less ventilation, moisture stays for a longer period of time. It doesn't dry out, and it's just a better environment for stuff to grow. So you can have a moisture issue that's hitting, impacting the wall, and the front of the wall looks fine. Why? Because it's open to the whole house, right? You're better ventilation, it's going to dry out quicker on the front than it will the back. If it penetrates into the wall a little bit, you're getting humidity increasing in a tight little space where there's no ventilation. And you're going to see higher probabilities and higher, like even visible mold growth behind a wall than in front of it. And so what we do is we look for these little tiny clues that we call the 5 signs of hidden mold growth, or the 5 signs of water damage, if you talk about it another way. And this is how we drive, like, where do we think there might be mold hiding in a house? So bubbling paint, peeling or chipping on like wood or paint is another one. Warping or like bowed floors or cabinet floor panels, something that's kind of bowed or warped, right? These are all things that moisture can cause. Corrosion, think rust. Think that white powdery stuff that you see like if you're in the Midwest or the East Coast, like in a basement, you see that white powdery stuff on the concrete wall. That's called efflorescence. That's another sign that moisture has kind of had a chemical reaction or a mineral deposit, I should say, on that block. So it's a sign of moisture intrusion. And then the last one's actually just staining itself, right? Like water staining. These become the things that a human eye can see that stuff, right? So we're looking for that clue and saying, okay, if there is like bubbling on the baseboard at the bottom of a wall next to a shower. Well, I've got a water source right next to it. I got a baseboard that's bubbling just a little bit at the bottom. I'm going to test the wall right where that bubbling is. And I'm going to see if there's mold behind the wall. And that's how we like navigate where we're identifying sources throughout a house. And then add one more piece onto it. Anywhere where there's moisture issues that are frequent, showers, bathrooms, sinks, washing machines, water heaters, anywhere where that is, those are your higher probability water intrusion areas, right? So the example I gave you of a shower, the reason that comes up is because we see that all the time. Oh, my kids splash out of the shower. Oh, when my door opens, it just drips over here, but I know where it came from. The whole I know where it came from, so it can't cause mold thing. Again, it's like us rationalizing things. It's a very interesting human thing that we do. Knowing that a problem happens should make you more aware of it than normalizing it, making yourself desensitized to it, right? And so if we know that these things happen more frequently, those become higher probability areas where you'll see problems more often. And so that's sort of how we go through a house and how we pinpoint where things are hiding.
You're like the Ghostbusters or something. It sounds like a fun job. See, that's interesting. We only see a small piece of time, like the time that we are alive and that we are in the home and what we actually see, what we're looking at. But there's this whole history of the home long before we were there. So there's that we don't see. That's invisible. Oh, that's kind of scary. Behind the walls, underneath the floors, all the places we can't actually see. But there are still ways to kind of prevent mold from getting out of control from these, I guess, these ghosts. Some of them are friendly ghosts, but a lot of them are, they are attacking our brain and body. So, yeah. The question is, how do we prevent further mold damage? You already kind of touched on it about the water and stuff, but yeah, what do we do?
Yeah, so it's kind of about the last point I just sort of talked through. So if there's more water in an area, just naturally in the way that the home is built, then there's a higher likelihood that there could be a water issue that occurs over there. So if we're talking about prevention, we have to understand that mold needs water to grow. If water is not there, mold will not grow, right? So that's the thing we can control. That's the thing, right? I'll put a seed in the ground and it'll just stay there forever unless I water the seed. Then the seed might grow, right? And so it's the same idea. So when I'm looking at high water traffic kind of areas in a house, that's the first thing that I would think about in terms of prevention. So here's a couple of examples. Sink cabinets. If you told me, Brian, your life depends on you finding one place in a house where there's mold, I'm going to drop you in front of this house and you can only look in one room in one place, and that's all that you get, I would look in a sink cabinet. That's where I would look. It happens all the time. People put all their stuff in their sink cabinets, their product bottles, and their this and their that, and all these things in there. Nobody could ever see in them. Nobody even looks in them ever. And then what's going on in a sink cabinet? You got your faucets and stuff on top. If it's a kitchen sink cabinet, you got your garbage disposal that's down under there. You got plumbing lines in the wall right behind your sink cabinet. And every product bottle that you have in a cabinet, the primary ingredient is water. Every single one. You have water in every direction, just waiting to come out and get this sink cabinet, right? So how do you prevent it? In every single sink cabinet in my house, I have this rubber insert that goes into the floor, that just lays on top of the floor, has a little lip around the edges. it can hold a gallon of water if there's ever a leak or a water issue. So if anything drips or leaks, just falls on the rubber panel. It doesn't cause damage to my wall and to my cabinet, and doesn't cause mold growing all over the place. And that's a prevention piece. So for sink cabinets, that's an example. Look under your cabinets. I won't say every week because no one's insane like I am. Once a month, take everything out, look under them, make sure nothing's leaking, and have these rubber things under there. You're probably going to cut down 95% probability of mold growing in a sink from a normal little drip or something like that. So there's one big one. Another one, showers. We pump hundreds of gallons of water out of the shower head every time we take a shower, probably, right? Or during the day, or everybody who's using our shower. Our showers are built of tile, and everybody's like, oh, mold can't grow in tile. But what's connecting all the tile? Grout. Grout is not tile. Grout is not waterproof. Grout deteriorates over time if water keeps hitting it. It just deteriorates, it breaks down, then little micro holes grow in the grout, and then water starts going through the grout, and then it gets behind the tile. And once it gets behind the tile, mold's going to grow back there. You can have mold growing in the grout. So we can't stop all the water coming down. You're in a shower, right? But what you can do is when you're done showering, I have one of these little squeegees in my shower. All the walls, I squeegee all the water on the walls down to the floor. And then once I get it to the floor, I squeegee all of it to the drain. Takes me 60 seconds to do that. And you're reducing such a big component of a very expensive area to fix too. You get mold behind a shower, you have to gut your shower out, right? Like, and then you have to rebuild a shower. Like, that's an expensive thing to do. So what's happening is that the grout is deteriorating and then water's going in through the grout. The reason grout deteriorates is because water is just sitting on it for extended periods of time, and it's just degrading it and degrading it and degrading it. So take the water away from it, and you'll extend the life of your grout significantly. And then be proactive and actually just re-grout your shower every X period of time. So you're staying ahead of the degradation. And you do that, and you're protecting your shower so much just by doing a couple maintenance things. So there's also those little moisture detector things. Like I have a Simply Safe system at my house, right? And so I got these little water ones. I put one right under my water heater, like emergency drop valve that comes out. So if water ever comes out of that thing, I get, which happened like 3-4 months ago, I get an immediate alert like, hey, there's water coming out of this thing. I don't go look at my water heater every day. So having something to tell me right when it's happening is very, very helpful, right? So you can put these under sinks, put them by your water heaters, So there's a lot that you can do to manage moisture. We just have to think about it a little bit. Nobody ever thinks about it because you never think that you have to, right? But then you're like, how do I stop water from getting to my sink cabinet? Well, maybe just put something on the bottom so then it doesn't get to my sink cabinet. How do I do this? How do I do that, right? My kids, it's the other thing. Kids are the source of the water coming out of the tub, right? They're splashing, they're doing all this stuff. And everyone's like, oh, kids, you can't handle, they can't control them, they do whatever they want. And that's fair unless you redirect them. My kids, not one drop of water comes out of a tub. Not one drop of water comes out of a tub because they know if it does, the whole thing is over immediately. Like you end playtime in the bath. I have a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old now. So like when they were younger, I was doing this. You end playtime in the bath and it's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you ended playtime. They're not going to do it again. They are perfect. Water never comes out of this thing, right? So there's like, you just have to, if you understand like where the key water areas are and just kind of try to come up with strategies and solutions to like stop it or prevent it or whatever it might be, then that's a huge step towards not having massive mold problems in these key areas.
Yeah, I had this girlfriend and she'd make me squeegee the walls after my shower. And I was like, I don't want to do it. But I did do it because I didn't want to, get kicked out or, in the relationship or whatever. So yeah, you sort of just communicate. Communication might be another tool into preventing mold damage, exposure, etc. How do you get rid of it though? I know you mentioned mold is in every home, so we can't really fully get rid of it, but we can maybe diffuse it or get it down to low enough levels that we're not really affected so deeply. Can we get rid of it ourselves, or what do you do when? Or I guess it's not you, but some other company comes in and cleans it up.
Yeah. So what we do is we find it and we help understand what it is and we create the action plan on how to fix it. So like go back to that cancer analogy, we're the oncologist that's uncovering what's going on and really understanding what is it, how bad is it, where is it, how do you fix it? Then let's say it needs surgery. Then there's the surgeon who goes in and does the surgery, and that's the equivalent of a remediation company. So those are the two parts. There's us as more of your inspection assessment company, and then your remediation company does the surgery, if you will, to get rid of things. So the key is source removal. Okay. So what a lot of people do, and a reason why a lot of people stay sick, is that they'll either surface clean something, or they'll get sold on like a magic fog that can come into your house and just magically kill everything, and there's no problem anymore. Remediation companies will sell this as like solutions because it doesn't cost them anything. They can upcharge it a whole lot. They make a lot of money on it, and they're in and out of the house very quickly because they're not actually removing any impacted building materials. They're just fogging. They're just putting this magic fog in the air, and they sell people on the fact that this fog is going to kill everything, right? So the really important piece to understand here is that your body doesn't care if the mold that you breathe is alive or dead. It doesn't care. So when someone's like, it's going to kill everything, I don't care. If I had a dead body in my crawl space, I would still smell the dead body, even though you killed it, right? So whether there's a live dead body or a dead body, or a live body or a dead body in my crawl space, either way, it's a problem, right? Like either way, it's an issue. And it's the same thing for mold, right? So we can't like fog and think it's going to work, but they're so good at selling it. They're so good at it. It gets behind the walls, it deactivates it, it does all this stuff. It doesn't matter because the particle is still there. It doesn't evaporate the particle in nothingness like that. It doesn't disintegrate it into nothing. It just leaves it there. And then that cloud that we talked about continues to pop around and we continue to breathe it. So the key is source removal. Okay. There's mold behind a wall. You need to remove the wall to get to where the mold is hiding back there, right? We talked before about how it's bigger in these hidden areas because it's a better environment for it to grow. So think of it like the Titanic and like this tip of the iceberg. You know, it wasn't the tip of the iceberg that took the boat down. It was they had no idea how big the iceberg was underneath, and they steered around the tip, and then they hit the rest of the iceberg and it took the boat down, right? And like that's what happens in our house, whether it's flooring or walls or ceilings or whatever it is. So the key to this whole process is unfortunately, there's not quick fixes. There's not like, I'm just going to wipe this or, you know, I'm not going to just clean the front of a drywall or wipe my grout or something like that, right? If the mold is there, it's there at this point. And like surface cleaning generally is not the answer, with the exception of some, you know, specific areas. So then what the idea here is yes, you might have to remove a wall. You might have to remove something. What we want to help guide our clients to do is how few things do you need to remove, right? So if I come in your house and I find 10 problems, not all 10 problems are the same level of severity. So I find 10 problems, you don't need to necessarily remove all 10 things. These 2 things are the ones that we think are like the most severe. So just handle those 2 things. Start there, right? See how you're doing, see what's going on. And so the idea is like really like targeted surgical precision on where you go, as a, you know, almost like you're a sniper, as opposed to like walking in somewhere with just like, you know, Rambo and a machine gun just shooting everything up, right? And so like that's kind of the difference between the 2 of them. It helps manage the cost too, because you're not doing so much remediation in a house, but it really increases the effectiveness and the return on that investment that you're making because you're getting the worst places when you do it.
You and your cousin Corey started this business, We Inspect, but it's sort of part of a larger story. I'm kind of curious about that story, how you got into this mold business, and maybe how Corey and his father and perhaps grandfather got motivated to start doing this.
Yeah, well, it wasn't his grandfather. His grandfather sold cars, and I've heard stories of what he sold people, and I can't even believe that happened. So Corey's father, his name is Steve. Steve has a twin brother named Mark. Mark is my father-in-law. So I married Mark's daughter. My wife is Corey's biological cousin. I am Corey's married into the family cousin. So that's the connector. So you have these 2 twin brothers who like 25 years ago completely reinvent their lives. They worked in telecom and they did all this stuff. And they, for whatever reason, decided, hey, we're going to look at something else. And they kind of come across this mold thing. Now, this is like before anyone really knew like the health impact of mold, right? Like this is the very, very early stages of when a doctor by the name of Dr. Shoemaker was just starting to put out information about how mold impacts the body, right? We're talking like right around the 2000s is when this is. And so they start these mold inspection businesses, one in LA, one in New York, and they start hearing their clients continually asking them why they're sick. And is what you're doing going to help me? And all these different things. Well, they didn't know any of that at that time, right? Like they were kind of just starting. So they dive in and they start doing research. They start finding medical conferences that are environmentally focused medical conferences, which at that time, there wasn't many of them. And there wasn't that many people that showed up. Now there's like a bajillion of them. And there's like thousands of people that show up. And even myself and Corey now teach all the other doctors at these things, right? Like that's what it's evolved into. But like way back then, it was, they go to these conferences and there's, maybe 50 doctors or something. And they would go up and like, hey, what do you guys practice? Where are you guys located? Like, oh, we're not doctors. And they're like, well, what are you doing here? And they're like, well, we just want to learn because we do this, this is what we do. And our clients are kind of talking about this and we just want to learn to help them. And the doctors are like, that's what you do? We need this so bad. And so they kind of realized that there was this whole like underswell of need that wasn't at all really known in any sort of mainstream avenue yet, right? It was all this very like I don't know if it's underground, but it was just very early on. So they really started developing inspection processes and doing all the research. Like everything I'm telling you, I learned from Mark and Steve, right? Like this is like family business down, understanding how all this works and the building science and how you find these hidden problems and all that stuff. And so they start doing that, and then they start creating really, really specialized businesses, but they were localized in LA and New York area. But it was, all people who were sick, right? Now everybody's sending them to go work with Mark or go work with Steve. They're going to figure out the house. Nobody else can do it. These are the only guys that can do it. And so they start doing that and become very successful. And then at a point in time, they, didn't want to do it anymore, right? They were still the ones going in the houses. They were older, right? They're like, I don't want to do this anymore. And so Corey and I basically took the businesses and said, hey, we're now starting to present and teach doctors all over the country. And so now what's happening is we're getting inquiries from everywhere. Everyone wants to work with us. And we weren't at all set up to do that. So Corey and I said, hey, we have a plan on how we think we can help people everywhere, right? We think this is a huge thing. We've obviously seen the growth of the need of this, right? And even to today, it's continuing the awareness and the importance. So we figured out a way to help people everywhere, which then turned the companies into We Inspect, and we essentially absorbed the dad's companies and took them over and turned them into We Inspect. And this is where we are, right? And so that's how it all happened.
Okay. So if people want to learn more about all this mold stuff, but in particular, probably how to get their home checked out or any of this, yeah, there's your website, there's your stuff, there's your podcast. Please share all that, but also maybe some other resources and things that people might find interesting if they want to continue this conversation, because it's we're only less than 45 minutes in, and it's not enough.
Yeah. The thing that I found really interesting is like digging into the health connection to mold specifically. Our industry is still very behind the times on like how you actually go through a space. So there's just a lot of inspectors, especially like local inspectors, that they'll come in. It's like, oh, we'll do an air sample in your room. Like that does not work. Air samples in rooms don't work. It doesn't find problems. Even if it did show up with an elevation, what do I fix? You took a sample in the middle of the room. So the answer is either gut my entire room because I don't know where it came from, or enter magic fog. Like those are the two options that come off of that, right? And so like our industry, unfortunately, is just, there's not a lot there, right? Which has been fortunate for us because we really have risen up as like the company. Like there's really no one else to go do what we do. But I actually really enjoyed digging into like the health connection stuff and really like understanding like how mold impacts our bodies in different ways. Because I think what that does is it helps kind of the light bulb on like, oh, this thing that I didn't think was an issue, like there's a connection here, right? Like now with AI, man, I do like Gemini deep research on all kinds of stuff, and I'll just do it on like mold connected stuff and just see what comes up for all the medical papers and all the research that exists. And it's like blowing my mind. Like I used to look in my bed at night, I would be searching like Google Scholar, and I would just be like mold in the brain. And then it would just show up all these links. You know how the internet was before AI. You'd be like, oh, let me scroll through one. Nah, this isn't it. And you would just spend all night and maybe not see something. Now, I do a deep research study on mold, and I'm getting a 35-page cited freaking research paper on how it all works. And it's so interesting, right? There is so much data, supporting all this. This isn't some like weird like guy with a crazy idea thing anymore. Like this is very, very real, very connected. Hundreds and hundreds of research studies tying mold exposure and mycotoxin exposure to all kinds of different health issues in the body. It's all there. And so for me, I think that that's really interesting to see that stuff. And then in terms of like, if you start putting the pieces together, like, oh, I think this might be a thing, then like I said, there's kind of two paths you take. Start with the dust test. It's thedusttest.com. Just see if you have a high mold load in your house. It's that easy. And it's super, it's not super expensive. It's very easy to do. And then if you want to dig in more, kind of what we talked about, like, hey, I want to get my house looked at, like look through this. Our website is yesweinspect.com. So our company is We Inspect and yesweinspect.com. There's a button right up at the top, book a free consult call with us. And we'll talk to you about your situation and, see how we can help you.
Well, maybe next time if you're willing to come back on, or one of your buddies is, we can talk about that body brain mold connection. Yeah, because we didn't dig too deeply into it this time, and which is kind of surprising because this is a brain health podcast. But I was just so curious about this whole environmental piece of it. But yeah, I'm looking forward to that potential conversation. And thank you so much for teaching me. I learned a lot in this very short time, and I really appreciate it. And thank you so much, Brian.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.